The US president says he is unsure if he is willing to make a deal with Iran to end the war in the Middle East. Donald Trump claimed Tehran was begging for an agreement to be reached, though he warned the US would blow them away if Iran didn't agree. Officials in Tehran were reported as saying that a US peace proposal was one-sided, unfair, and served only US and Israeli interests in the region.
Right now, this is what a ceasefire looks like in the Middle East. An Israeli airstrike on a camp in Gaza. A reminder of just how faltering agreement can be as the Middle East gets pulled into even further conflict. Israel announcing earlier it had killed the head of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard's naval force. Israel's military said Commander Ali Reza Tangsiri had been overseeing the blockade of the Strait of Hormuz, one of the world's busiest oil shipping channels, which has been largely shut since this conflict started. How to end this war and get that oil route open again, vexing the US president at a cabinet meeting earlier.
They now have a chance to make a deal, but that's up to them. And they'll tell you, we're not negotiating. We will not negotiate. Of course they're negotiating. They've been obliterated. Who wouldn't negotiate? They are begging to make a deal. We'll see if we can make the right deal. And if they make the right deal, then the strait will open up. Hormuz Strait will open up.
Tehran is adamant that messages sent through intermediaries do not constitute talks. The lack of clarity on whether discussions are even happening, a portent perhaps of how much distance remains as the rest of the world watches and waits.
All the countries in the world are one way or the other way affected by this war. So it is in the interest of everybody that this war stops. There has to be a diplomatic solution so that this region will come out of it stronger and actually more peaceful.
Almost a month into this conflict, though, and no one is sure what comes next, exit or escalation. Fiona Mitchell, RTÉ News.
In Lebanon, the conflict is also intensifying, particularly in the south, where Irish UN peacekeepers are stationed. Israel says it plans to create what it calls a buffer zone in areas monitored by the UN. Our Clarity correspondent Kate MacDonald has more.
Israeli forces are ramping up airstrikes and ground operations in southern Lebanon as they prepare to isolate the area to create a so-called buffer zone to fight Hezbollah. Residents who were ordered by Israel to evacuate north won't be allowed to return, Israel says, until Hezbollah is removed. But the group is showing no signs of backing down. All of this is happening in an area where Irish peacekeepers are operating. This shaded area is the UN patrolled zone in southern Lebanon, which will effectively become Israel's buffer zone. Along the Litani River here, Israeli forces have destroyed at least 5 bridges, effectively cutting this area off from the rest of Lebanon. If we zoom into this dark blue area, we can see the Irish area of responsibility. Here, around 300 Irish peacekeepers operate in 3 locations, including the main base Camp Shamrock. There has been intense bombing and ground fighting throughout the Irish area in recent days and weeks. In all of these locations, there have been multiple confirmed clashes and airstrikes over the last 14 days. They give a sense of just how concentrated the fighting has become around Irish positions. The Defence Forces say Irish personnel are accounted for.
It certainly is a more volatile situation than previously. We have some significant force protection measures that we can scale up with that volatility to mitigate against the risk in the region. So our personnel, they're in good spirits. They're carrying out their role still. But the personnel are well trained and they're well prepared for these kind of situations. So they are where they have to be, where they need to be, and they're the eyes and ears of the community, of the global community right now.
For many in Lebanon, the fear is what comes next, particularly as the UN mission is set to end in December after nearly 5 decades. Questions remain about who will take up the peacekeepers' vital role of monitoring an area that has repeatedly seen conflict between Israel and Hezbollah.
Well, in the Philippines, transport workers, commuters and unions are holding a two-day strike in protest over soaring fuel prices. Diesel and petrol prices have more than doubled since the Iran war broke out. The country relies on supplies that come through the Strait of Hormuz for 98% of its energy needs. The crisis has prompted the government more than 7,000 kilometres away from the war to declare a national energy emergency.
Hundreds of transportation workers have joined the two-day strike across the Philippines, calling on their government to do more by increasing both their wages and public fare costs. Local diesel and petrol prices have more than doubled in the country, caused by the conflict in the Middle East. Unions say the Marcos administration is lacking a unified and coordinated action plan. As the strikes got underway, more than 700,000 barrels of Russian crude oil arrived in the country. Earlier this week, Philippine President Ferdinand Marcos declared a state of national energy emergency, the first country in the world to declare this following the US-Israel war with Iran. The Philippines imports 98% of its fuel from the Gulf and has about 45 days of supply left, resulting in lengthy queues at petrol stations across the Philippines. Oil and natural gas prices have soared since marine traffic has been severely disrupted through the Strait of Hormuz. The waterway is a crucial route for global oil shipments, with around 20% of the world's oil trade passing through the strait in 2024. The Philippines government has promised to look for new sources of oil. Dimitri O'Donnell, RTÉ News.
The central bank has said that a severe energy shock caused by the Iran war could push inflation above 4% this year. It also warned that household incomes will be eroded by higher fuel prices. Our economics and public affairs editor David Murphy joins us now. And David, this is just the latest in a series of warnings, really, that prices are set to rise.
Yeah, that's right. And you can see from our earlier reports, there doesn't seem to be any resolution coming in this conflict. This evening, the price of oil is up again. It's at $108 a barrel, up about 7%. Now, the central bank looked at a range of scenarios, and in a more benign scenario, it says inflation will be about 3% this year. But if there's a severe energy shock, it'll be up at 4.2%. We'll also see erosion of household incomes, and it will slow down economic growth. It was about 5% last year, could be around 3% this year for the domestic economy. Now, there have been other forecasts today, one of them from the Organisation for Economic Cooperation and Development. It's looked at the developed countries, particularly the US. It's saying there's going to be inflation above 4%, and the entire global economy, it looks as if growth there is going to be dragged down because of the Iran war. It really depends how long the conflict goes on for. And all these forecasts basically say the same thing: higher inflation, lower growth, and that's as a result of the Iran war.
Concerning times. David Murphy, thanks indeed. It's almost a month since the war in Iran began, leading to the displacement of millions of people, surging energy prices and instability across the region. Earlier, I spoke to the president of the International Rescue Committee and former British Foreign Secretary David Miliband. I began by asking him about the humanitarian situation in Iran.
Well, what we're hearing is that there's over 3 million people inside Iran who've been displaced by the conflict. Obviously, it's a population of 90 million. So the potential for mass displacement and potentially even big refugee flows into Europe is really quite significant if the conflict continues. Obviously, there's regional consequences as well. In Lebanon, which is the second front of the war, over 1 million people, that's about a quarter or a fifth of the population, have been uprooted from their homes by the second front in the conflict. So I think we can certainly classify this as a direct humanitarian emergency, even before we get on to the global consequences of the blockage of the Straits of Hormuz. In the region, it's already causing very high levels of need.
The potential displacements that we're seeing here, can you put that into context to us? How does that compare to the 2015 refugee crisis?
Well, it's very interesting that you raise that. The refugee crisis in 2015-16 was precipitated by the Syrian civil war. Syria is a country of 25 million people, so a quarter of the size of Iran, the total refugee flow was about 6 to 7 million from there. At this stage, the displacement is internal within Iran and within Lebanon. But obviously, if the conflict continues, if it becomes more intense, then the possibilities are for a much larger refugee flow because the Iranian population is so much larger. Obviously, Turkey very worried, and European leaders concerned about this as well. They've got all sorts of reasons to be worried about the course of the war, including the way in which it's propping up Russian finances and the implications for Ukraine. But in terms of the direct refugee danger, it's quite significant.
We've heard so much discussion about the impact on energy with the closure of the Strait of Hormuz. Of course, around a third of the world's fertiliser also passes through the strait. And if that doesn't start moving soon, what is the impact going to be on people in the region, but indeed people around the world?
Well, the Council on Foreign Relations, which is one of the leading think tanks in America, has said we should understand that the potential food security consequences of the blockage of the Straits of Hormuz, precisely for the reasons to do with fertilizer that you mentioned. They call it a slow motion famine machine. And the truth is, across the world, in the next 4 to 6 weeks, you've got the need for fertilizer to go on to the soil. As winter turns to spring, it's desperately important that there is effective fertilizer flow. And if there isn't, then sure as night follows day, as sure as summer follows spring, you'll see that the yields are lower, the harvests are worse, and there's a real danger for the poorest people in the world. Just to put that in context, at the moment, the World Food Programme has said the danger is that around 50 million people are pushed into the most dire levels of food insecurity if there is no improvement in the humanitarian flow through the Straits of Hormuz.
You are a former foreign secretary. You have experience in geopolitics. Can you see any benefits that this US-Israeli war has brought about so far?
Well, it's much more obvious what are the downsides, because obviously there's the immediate humanitarian consequences in the region. There's the humanitarian implications of the interruption of food supply. There's the third element of the triple whammy, which is the implications on geopolitics. And we're seeing that both in the danger of the prolongation and the increasing intensity of the war in Ukraine. I mean, the improvement in the Russian budgetary situation, the diversion of Ukrainian weaponry away from the ability for Ukraine to defend itself. Obviously, on the other side of the ledger, there's the important threats that have previously existed from the nascent Iranian nuclear program. But obviously, when I was in government, we spent all of our time seeking diplomatic resolution to that nuclear program. There's concern about the Iranian ballistic missile program. There's concern about what's happening in Lebanon with Hezbollah. But the ledger at the moment is obviously a very negative one.
And all of this happens at a time when aid budgets around the world are being cut by several governments, including the UK government. What is the real world impact of this, and how does Ireland fare in terms of its aid budget?
Well, you're making a very important point, because we've got high and rising humanitarian need around the world. But then the scissors effect is that with that high and rising need, you've got diminishing aid budgets in many places. Now, the only piece of good news, frankly, is that the European Union's aid budget is not being cut. And countries like Ireland, also Denmark, they're actually increasing their aid budget. Ireland is providing a vital lifeline for clients of the International Rescue Committee. We're very proud of our partnership with Irish Aid, which is focused especially on women and girls who are incredibly impacted by these conflicts around the world. But it's the worst possible time for countries to be cutting the aid budgets. It's a very short-term response. And I'm pleased that Ireland is showing the way. It's using some of its improved budgetary position to recognize that this is an interconnected world. If the Iran crisis shows anything, it shows the way we're connected in this global village. And so I really want to thank the Irish people and the Irish government for the stand they're taking. I wish others were following them.
David Miliband, President of the International Rescue Committee and former British Foreign Secretary, thanks indeed for joining us on 6-1.